We've come to Atiu to dive in the underwater caves here that no one's ever explored before, and we find it a lot of fun, cave diving. It's quite dangerous, and you'll see some of the things we do on the tape, on this tape.
We're losing the sight.
I'm David Goldie.
And I'm Paul Tobin.
Might have seen us around.
We've come to Atiu to explore some of the underwater caves here.
These are shots of the boys from the Tangatangi Tumanu who we got to help us carry our compressor through the Makatea.
The guy at the front and the left there is Paul, and he showed us the cave originally. The cave's called Ananura.
As you can see, the compressor is pretty heavy, and these guys did a great job getting it through the Makatea. It was pretty hard work. We brought a compressor with us. It was so we could fill our tanks. We have to bring the tanks up from the cave. There's a cave down there, and fill them at the compressor there.
This is the head of the top of a scuba bottle here, and we're connecting one of the filling hoses off the compressor to the bottle so that we can fill it with compressed air. And turning the valve on now.
Right, just go again.
This is a petrol motor that we have connected to an air compressor.
Okay.
Yeah, this is starting the compressor now. On the left is the motor and the right is the compressor. What the compressor does is suck air in and pump it out in high pressure. Do that again?
You can see carrying the bottle through the cave it takes about, what, 10 minutes to get down the water? Maybe a bit less, but it's pretty strenuous.
It's quite hot inside these caves, it's very sweaty stuff.
Down to the water for every dive, and then 2 bottles back up to the compressor. I've just got 1 in the pack there.
So you got to try and coming through here?
They're too heavy, this is a good shot.
There's some tricky sections walking through this cave here, carrying a tank on your back.
We take the tanks one at a time because they're too heavy to carry 2 at a time.
Ooh.
At the cave here we have to lower the tanks down to the water. You can see it's about a 6 metre drop straight down to the water. And once we've lowered our gear down, then we climb down the rocks and get in the water and start putting the gear together. We have to attach the tanks to a harness that we wear so that the tanks stay on our backs, and we have to connect the regulators too and the mouthpieces so we can breathe from the tanks.
Here we are in the water, gearing up before our dive. We probably spent about half an hour to an hour in the water before a dive, putting all our gear together. It's me threading my regulator hose. The top 6 metres of water is fresh water, underneath that is the salt. This is the fresh water and it's a bit silty. It's got silt in the water, which is why it's a bit milky like that. You'll see in a minute we reach 6 metres and it suddenly goes clear.
You can see the line there now that we've put in the cave that we used to follow, just to make sure we can find our way out again. We're just coming down now into where the salt water is, and you'll see that the water suddenly gets clearer. That's it now, we're now in the salt water and you can see much better down in the salt water. There are no motorbikes down in this cave. But there is a lot of silt, and like you can see now, sometimes the water gets quite murky and you can't see, and that clears up again.
Every time we swim through a tight section, like you just saw then, bubbles and our fins knock the silt down into the water and you can't see for a while. You can see all the stalagmites and stalactites that formed thousands and thousands of years ago when this was out of the water, and now it's all underwater and they've turned brown. The salt water's turned them brown. They used to be a creamy colour that you know from the caves, if you've seen them in the caves. At this point we're really enjoying the dive because we've been carrying our gear through the Makatea and through the cave and then setting it all up, and now we're diving and we're having fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun flying through these caves. You just drift along, fly through the water.
Okay.
Most of the parts where we dive in this cave are about 10 metres deep, so we're about 10 metres underwater here, and we're surrounded by rock. The walls are rock, the floor's rock, and above our heads the ceiling is also rock. So it's just a tunnel going through the Makatea full of water.
The whole time here we're following a line that we've put in on another dive. You have to take a line everywhere you go so that when it silts up or gets dark you can find your way back. All our gear is very carefully rigged up so that we know where everything is and we can get to everything in an emergency. You can see the reel there to the right of my 2 tanks. When we get to the end of the line we're going to tie that on and keep exploring into the unknown. But we take that reel everywhere we go. We each have a spare reel. We have 4 reels in all.
You can see there's 2 tanks on the back there. The reason for that is we have 2 independent systems for breathing. If we have a problem with one of the tanks, then we have another tank as a backup that allows us to get out of the cave safely.
Similarly with the lights, I've got 2 backup lights on my helmet, you can see there. I've got 2 primary lights, 2 bright lights. So between the 4 of them, I can be sure that I'm not going to find myself stuck in the dark. In tight sections like this, you have to be very careful not to bump into the walls. The walls are very fragile, and you can break off stalagmites, you can stir up mud, silt from the walls. Suddenly you can't see where you're going. You can see how bubbles there are knocking down that silt.
There's lots of delicate formations throughout this cave. You can see on the left there's some long thin stalagmites and stalactites. And up on the left wall there, you can just make out the orange line. That's the line that we've put in that we use to follow so we don't get lost.
At this point we're about 100 metres from the entrance, from the pool where we started. And there's no quick way out. If we have any problems with our gear, we can't just come to the surface. We have to swim back 100 metres. There I am making a mistake, touching the wall like that.
The bottom of these caves is covered in really fine mud that just sits on the bottom, but if you touch it or even wave a fin at it, it'll stir all the mud up and you won't be able to see it all. Sometimes the cave gets a bit small and you have to wriggle and sort of push your way through.
Great thing about this cave is you get to a tight section like that and then it opens up again and you're floating through clear water again. Now we've come to the end of the line. I've taken out my reel and I'm going to tie on and keep exploring.
You can see the aluminium box on the front there. That's a battery pack for our torches.
And I've just checked my air in one tank. I'm swapping over my regulators out of shot. So I'm now breathing from my other tank. From this point it gets quite tight. There's a restriction here. I'm just looking at it, wondering which way to tackle it. Yeah, yeah, and this is a sort of situation where you can get tangled in the line. Also passing through some cloudy water there. That's called a halocline. Looks like I'm a bit stuck there. It's very important to stay calm in situations like this because we're a long way into the cave and panicking is no help at all. If you get stuck, you have to work it out yourself and turn around and come back. Probably the most important thing about cave diving is to stay calm.
This is the first time we've been in this room. It's the first time that anybody's been in this this part of the cave here. So it's all very interesting to find out what's there. As we swim along with the line, we wrap it around objects, stalagmites or bits of rock. And you can see here Dave's wrapping the line around a bit of rock. The reason we wrap it around rock like that is so that the line just doesn't drift all through the cave, so that it makes the line easier to follow. Dave's just about to find out that this passage doesn't go all that far and he can't fit through, so he turns around and comes back out again. Here he is now, and as he comes back, he reels that line back in. Because no one's been in these caves before, a lot of the formations in there are still well intact. They're very delicate, they're long, thin stalactites. You can see some of them here. There's lots of them throughout the cave. And because no one's been in here, and because they're supported by water, none of them are broke. A lot of them are still intact and are still hanging from the ceiling, and they're very beautiful. And it's a lot of fun swimming through this cave and looking at all these really nice formations.
In Australia, a lot of the dry caves still have their formations in them. They haven't been snapped off because people who explore the caves there want to protect them, keep them as they are. So we were quite surprised when we came here and found that the Atuians like to break them off and take them home.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
You can see on the line there's a little white arrow. We put those on the line and they always point out. So if we ever get lost in the cave, we follow the line and we just follow the directions of the arrows.
And you're always very careful never to leave the line unless you tie on a reel and reel off to where you're going, so you can come back. Even if you can't see, you can come back and feel the arrow and you'll know which way's out. We always do that. There's a story which is true about an African cave diver, South African, who left the line in a cave just like this, stirred up some silt, couldn't find his way back to the main line. He eventually found a dry passage, came up, surfaced in a dry passage, and he died 3 weeks later of starvation. They found his body months later. There's quite a few stories like that, people dying after leaving the line, so we make sure we're very, very careful.
We have 2 tanks of air, and every so often we check our gauges to see how much air we have in the tanks, and every once in a while we change regulators from one tank. I'm taking one reg out, and we put the other one in. That's connected to the other tank, so that we take a little bit of air from one tank and then a little bit from the other tank, and we just keep alternating tanks. And once we reach a certain pressure in the tanks, then we turn around and exit the cave to make sure we've got lots of air left in our tanks in case we have any problems on the way out.